Okay, so I want to be fair here, John, but I think it is important to stress that if you stay in this track, you'll get to hear about an R&D 100 award winner. So maybe you want to stick around. Our esteemed panelists today are Gregory McShane, Tim Klett, and a crowd favorite, Tom Moran. So I am going to try and give a very abbreviated introduction to all of these stellar panelists because I don't want to take up your time talking. I want you to hear from them. So let me tell you first about Gregory McShane. Greg is with the Integrated, not a good start, Integrated Operations Division, Office of the Chief of Staff Technical Branch at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He has over 30 plus years in the areas of federal government consulting, electrical utility, and engineering. Greg has a BS in civil engineering and an MBA in finance. He's a certified business continuity professional as recognized by the Disaster Recovery Institute International. And he's currently on year 16 working for CISA Integrated Operations Division Technology Branch with a focus on developing IT strategies to capture and implement IT system requirements cradle to grave to support and complement CISA's central and regional operations in areas of physical cyber operations. He's going to tell you about some highlights he's had through his career, which some of the greatest highlights are working with the All Hazards Consortium and the use case process that they have. So we'll hear from Greg in just a moment. Our next panelist is Timothy Klett. He is a senior technology integration strategist at Idaho National Lab. He has over 20 years of experience working with information technology solutions for both the Department of Energy and the Department of Homeland Security. His current work includes the construction, storage, and analysis of software bills of material, my beloved acronym SBOMs, research in refactoring the current infrastructure data taxonomy, and overseeing the design, development, and security of several mission critical systems utilized by DHS. Finally, Mr. Moran serves as the executive director for the All Hazards Consortium. Tom is a passionate national spokesman for innovation and public-private operational coordination and investment. He supports the AHC's efforts to assist state and local governments in their efforts to integrate the private sector owners and operators of critical infrastructure and federal partners into regional planning, education, exercises, and operational projects and initiatives in the areas of disaster management, sensitive information sharing, cybersecurity, and solution development to operational issues. Tom has over 20 plus years in the communications and technology industry, working in the areas of marketing and sales, customer service, and organizing national user groups. With that, I will turn it over to our esteemed panel.
Tom, you want to kick it off or you want me to go ahead?
Yeah,
Sure.
I can kick it off. I'm sorry, I was fumbling with the mute button if you guys don't mind. So I figured what I'll do is I'd start with just a little bit of a background on what the CRA is, and then we'll just sort of have a roundtable discussion on sort of the past, present, and future of CRA, if that's okay with you, gentlemen.
Works for me.
All right, so let me kind of provide a little bit of background on this. So with the support of DHS, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, i.e. Greg, and through a partnership with the All Hazards Consortium, i.e. Tom, Idaho National Laboratory designed, developed, and deployed the Commercial Routing Assistance, or CRA, capability, which is for truckers and other commercial drivers in the US to understand restrictions that they might encounter as they travel across the country. And during today's session, we'll learn how CRA does multiple different things. It merges coordinated and vetted data streams. It plots multiple automated or custom routing options, and it visualizes a wide variety of state regulations and actions that a driver would encounter along a given route. And with CRA, commercial operators can plan vehicle movements across multiple states quickly, particularly during emergencies. And so I guess with that being said, let me see if I can stop my screen sharing so we can just kind of focus on each other here. I think back to this where we started, it was almost 2 years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was March of 2000, and there was a lot of restrictions, a lot of different things going on, obviously with the pandemic that we're unfortunately still in. But one of the things that kind of served as the starting point for CRA, and Greg, maybe you could speak to these, were the ESF 14 cross-sector coordinating calls. And so Greg, I think it'd be a good start if you want to talk a little bit about ESF 14 and then take us back to those calls and the types of people that were on them and what they were designed for.
Yeah, so let me kind of paint the picture here. It's a really such a good news story that happened kind of in a very much a uncertain, dire time when in the beginning of COVID. Things were shutting down. DHS CISA's kind of trying to figure out exactly how do we do this. At a time where you're not working in the office anymore. Now you're going virtual. Folks are now leveraging things like Teams or Zoom calls. So you're pretty much remote, working in a new environment if you weren't exactly used to that, on a full-time basis. So with that said, the ask from CISA leadership was to really, where can we minimize any interruptions to the supply chain? And that was an ask out to all the associate directors, assistant directors, and their deputies. And then, it was some of our CISA Central leadership actually approached us, and we had a current effort going on with AHC and INL to really tackle a lot of use cases. And this was just a fantastic use case to start looking at. So we kind of cleared the plate for this, and Brick Wilkinson was, hey, where can we actually leverage what we're doing here to help minimize that supply chain, and he came up with kind of an idea of maybe he was a Marine pilot, kind of that flight path or flight pattern before you go out. How can we minimize the interruptions or restrictions from point A to point B? And that could have been for anything. We were just kind of really searching for that solution of exactly that. So, with our approach to use cases, it was really, no different some of the other ones that we're working on, which is supply chain issues, lodging, fuel availability, restoration, all that pre-staging, damage assessments, reentry, fiber cuts, all very much, hurricane related. And that approach was really, bringing the right people at the table, which we had. We brought, the AHC, INL, from a technical perspective. AHC had a great connections to its membership. And then, on the CISA side of our operational folks, trying to really reach for a capability that we can leverage. I mean, I'll go back to, even some of the exec taskers that were going out to our regional offices on scraping for this information, going to the state websites or some of the local websites to get some of that restriction data. And with that said, it just wasn't an easy task to collect that data and information in an easily formatted way. And we were trying desperately. Some states had some really great information. Some states didn't really have much. Some posted on their website, and some others were, you had to scrape for that on social media or some of their Facebook sites, et cetera. So with that said, I mean, it's getting that right people at the table, identifying some of that data and trusted data, putting those right processes in place and identifying that right technology to do this. And, lo and behold, with the help of INL, somehow we came across it's a National Governors Association. They must have had a couple graduate students collecting all this data. So you talk about, minimizing, efforts across the board. If somebody else was already collecting this data and it's in a format, we can ingest it, that saves everybody. And, from CISA to the state to that are collecting this data to actually, share that data and information. So, we put our heads together, and within about a week's part of time, I think it was over the weekend, Tim, INL and the team, put together kind of a prototype to do this. And we looked at it Monday morning and like, wow, this is great. And can we feed the data in from NGA? Took a little time to do that. And then, once we had that prototype in place and we've put in front of, demoed it in front of our CISA leadership, they were like, wow, this is great. And then we started answering the questions of how do we use it? And it's, okay, well, let's just get a capability out there. We got it through our privacy office, through legal, 2 weeks later. And then, before you know it, it's out on the street and it's live. And, then all of a sudden we kind of got really great accolades from National Truckers Association. Wow, thanks for building this for us. And, with not even knowing who the audience might have been, but starting to build on that and identifying further restrictions. And we've been at it for almost 2 years. NGA has since kind of stopped doing and feeding that information. So it's been a bit of a challenge to identify, that restriction data and make those data connections again. But, the solution's, pretty awesome to know that it's still being used 2 years from now. And we're building off of that capability for the SISNet and INL supporting that effort. It's just great, and we can talk a little bit more, the restrictions, the data sets, as we talk through that. But, it was just a great, you talk about hitting pay dirt. We found gold, and that was that data feed right there off the bat that made this tool. And it's a recipe for success in getting the right people, the right processes, the right technology, and the right data at the time. And, Tom, we've been at this use case approach for a long time, and, we've probably had a lot of successes, but this is one of them that's really kind of that gold star and that standard. So hats off to everybody. Appreciate always the opportunity to work with you guys, and it's where can we take it next? So let's talk through that.
Yeah. Before we do that, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about, back in March, right? Shelter in place was a thing, and there was a lot of uncertainty. But what this came down to, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about people and data. So we were fortunate to have the right people in place across the board, right? So we've had partnerships. The three of our entities have worked together before on other solutions. So just the fact that the stars were aligned in that, hey, we all had a place at the table already, and hearing straight from private industry what those needs were allowed us to realize, okay, let's brainstorm, and having Tom at the table with his use case approach, right, where we're literally like doing the mobile whiteboard, thinking about what are the different requirements that we're hearing, what are the data needs, not only what are the data, what data do we need, where are we going to get it, how often are we going to update it. And so it was the perfect storm, so to speak, in terms of having the INL folks that have the people that can develop the technologies and the visualizations, but then also having Tom and the All Hazards Consortium team that are great at finding data and listening to the private industry, right? And so it was, okay, we're going to run with this part of it. We're going to, kind of mock up a visualization. Tom, you guys go and get us the data and give us the feed. We'll hook it up and we'll make it happen. And we did. So this literally started like back of the napkin type stuff. And I mentioned shelter in place. I mean, what else were we going to do over the weekend, right? We couldn't go anywhere. So we just sort of hammered away, like, let's find out what data's out there. Let's figure out how we can pool it together. And then let's figure out, through what medium we can make it exposed to the people that need it. So, like you said, Greg, it was actually, this was a fun one.
Yeah, right.
And I think it was like a matter of a couple of weeks from when we got that call from Brick and you, in terms of like, hey, we need to get some capability out there to help these truckers that are figuring out like, hey, I'm going through these states. I don't know if I can go through with this tonnage. My driver's license expired. Like, what do I do? And so we were able to put something together, and we'll take a look at that soon. But Tom, I kind of wanted to get your perspective on, back in March of 2020.
Yeah, yeah. This was an interesting one. When COVID struck, I remember we were trying to figure out what was, the consortium is very strong with disasters, and this being a pandemic, right, a health kind of state health thing, we were trying to figure out, okay, where do we fit in? Well, as always, it's the same thing. It's the people. I told Greg one time, Greg, this is a great 3-week turnaround. We've been preparing for 17 years of relationship building. And what we didn't have was, Tim, you and INL's really unique ability to visualize data, right? I didn't even know what, that just sounded to me like, what does that mean? And boy, when I saw it, it was like, okay, if I'm a truck driver, I can use this. And so one of the challenges were, we didn't know upfront, what are all the restrictions? There were 11, in some states 13, separate restrictions that scared drivers, right? They didn't want to get the disease. They didn't want to get pulled over and have to shelter in place for 14 days, right? They didn't want to get fined or ticketed. And we heard directly from some of them just weren't moving. Commerce was dead in some areas, right? And of course, the states were trying to figure out how to stop the disease, how to stop the spread. And now, how do we grow our tax base? There's no business, right? I mean, this was kind of a weird scenario they had never faced before. So the governors wanted a solution as much as everybody else did, right? Because you need to get the economy moving, bring confidence back, instead of this fear that had just covered our country because of a lot of reasons. So what we were able to do is to form using our 6-step use case process, we were able to form quickly 2 working groups, one of states and one of industry. And we let the states tell us what are the issues, and we let industry tell us what are the issues. That gave us the information we needed. And to Greg's point, at that time, it was a National Governor Association, and I want to say the Council of State Governments was the second one. They were adding another layer of clarity that we didn't see before. So we were able to get that with our partner Benair Solutions, and we were able to pull that into an Esri framework. COVID also accelerated our Esri conversion. We were going through a 9-month plan. We had to do that in 2 weeks. And we had to convert everything we had over to an Esri platform for GIS information sharing in 2 weeks. So it was, but that's what happened. That was normal back then, right? I mean, it was all hands on deck. So I think the interesting part about it was understanding what are the state restrictions, right? How do they vary by state? Okay, how are they interpreted? This is one of the other things, Tim, that came out. The governor would issue a proclamation about social distancing. Okay, that makes sense. But let me tell you how it got interpreted. We had truck drivers pull up to a McDonald's for a drive-in, and they wouldn't serve them because they didn't want to violate there was so much fear. They didn't want to violate the 6 foot. Well, if you're a driver, if you're a truck at a drive-in, how do you do that? How do you reach out and give them their food? That's it, right? I mean, I'm just giving you one. There were dozens, but there's humans involved. And so that means there's always interpretations of the law or the thing that were kind of unintended. And we couldn't fix those, but we kind of captured the stories there. And so when Greg, who's been on our Friday calls, we've got a work group that's been together for 7 plus, maybe 8 years now. It's meet every Friday, and they're problem solving calls, right? Greg's been on there, for a long time. So the fortunate was, Greg, was having you hear both sides of this. You heard the DHS request, you heard the private sector issue, and because they've been working together for so long, this was like, okay, we're going to put all the use cases on hold. We're going to come and focus on this one. And it was lickety split. It was really quick. But then we had to pull it out and INL to come in and kind of make something. And literally it was over the weekend that I recall, Tim and I spoke, and he said, hey, Tom, we're gonna have a demo tomorrow. I said, are you kidding? from my experience with R&D, it ain't a matter of days or weeks. Okay, it's years sometimes, right? But this was just the nature of, like Greg said, the right people, the right scenario, the sense of urgency, the right data visualization lab, right? All that stuff came together, and it was just COVID. Everybody was all in all the time. As you all probably listening to this know, there was no time to mess around. So the other good thing about the people that helped plan it and input it were the very same people that put it to use. So a lot of the companies that were part of the work group also became part of the voice to spread the word, right? And it went out very quickly. And I remember Tim, you and I were talking. I said, Tim, I hope these glitches, because once you go live,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we had our external affairs folks all over it, and you know, they were pushing
Yeah.
information. I know INL's external affairs, they were working with
Oh
them.
yeah, no, yeah.
So it went out real quick. It was a lot of late nights.
This was a stretch for everybody's legal department, but I think just the nature of the beast, we were able to get it out along with education. We immediately held webinars, recorded them, put them on site, and sent those links out to people. So here's the app, here's the history, here's the technology, here's how you use it. We were able to address all those issues very quickly. And literally, I think 2-3 weeks later, we got a report back. I thought somebody said 5,000. There were 5,000 people using this within 2 weeks. Okay. Now I know marketing, that's an accomplishment, but again, it was COVID, right? It was like anything to help, and it answered the mail. The feedback we got was tremendous. It simplified it. It visualized it, which for the drivers, you know, that was really simple, and they could use it. And it didn't provide like a Google routing app. What it did is it computed a route that gave me 3 choices and which ones were the least restrictive at that moment in time, that I could take a southern route, a direct route, or a northern route, you know, whichever. But it was the perfect thing at the perfect time.
Yeah. Should we take a look at it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's coming through. Let me know if that's the guys able to see this.
Yep.
All right. So what we're looking at is the CRA website, and I'll key off of a couple things that Tom had mentioned. One is he mentioned those 13 data elements that were very important at the time, and we'll go through some of these. You know, state drivers license agency closures, CDL expiration extensions, issuance of testing restrictions, so on and so forth. So these are the data elements that were that we heard that were important to the truck drivers, right? And these are the data feeds. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Hey Tim, can I comment just on a couple of these
Sure,
to give folks
sure.
A little point of reference? Okay,
Sure.
driver's license agencies were closed. What's the big deal? Okay, well, the driver shortages were in place, and a lot of people were trying to go to renew their CDLs. Yep, you're driving on an expired license. Well, you got to go renew it. Well, they're closed. And I thought, okay, I didn't know that. Oh, that's a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the closures caused fear of driving without a license, right? Of course, then if you're CDL or you're hazmat, that's a whole nother layer. And then you got to have health. You know, part of that, you got to have a health. But you got to have a health approval, right? We didn't know this. And so some of these data elements, every one of them had a story behind it that made it real. Like, okay, what's the big deal about that, right? Closures, right? Closure, like facility closures, bar, restaurants. You know, truck drivers need a place to rest. They need to know where the rest stops. They're closed. Okay, I didn't know it was a big deal. They need a place to eat. They need a place to sleep. They need to get fuel. But with all these restrictions in place, a lot of these places were closed. So it was really a nightmare. I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't make
No, that's great. It's perfect context. And the issue was, you know, where do I go and get that data? I've got to go to the California website, and then I've got to go to the Texas website, and then which is it current? And so those were the needs that we heard, and so that kind of all went into our use case development. And we're like, okay. You know, we've got the data feeds now. What's a good mechanism in order to convey that? And there's a couple different I guess, people that would be leveraging this. It's the truck driver on the road. And we'll show how we architected this so that depending on the type of device you're on, you're still going to get the same experience, right? And we'll show the mobile view. But this view is more of your general view. Think of the dispatcher who's sitting in an office and saying, hey, all right, I know you've got to get from point A to point B. I recognize that you've got these things that you need to keep in mind. Let me find that path of least resistance for you, where I can find all these different data elements aggregated together, right? And so when you come into the first page of the application, you're kind of seeing that all of those different data points, and then sort of how they're they're summed across the different states. So let's take a dive into the sort of the meat of the application, and this is where the visualization comes in. And so you look at the map and you're like, oh wow, there's a bunch of red and yellow. Like what does that mean? So I'm going to quickly just kind of focus on truck routing to start. And you notice how we've got different types of information. We've got truck routing and we've got declarations and waivers. And declarations and waivers become important with an additional use case that we're working on currently and then in the future for hurricanes, storms, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for now, we'll just focus on truck routing. And to Tom's point earlier, if I'm only focused on, I don't really need to worry about a size or a weight limit, because I'm good to go on that front, and I don't necessarily need to worry about a medical grace period. I can sort of key in the specific data elements that matter to me, right? And then as I do that, you can see that the states go from, they change color. And the idea behind this visualization is, states that are green are good to go, so to speak, right? They're going to have the least amount of restrictions given the specific data options that you selected. And then more towards the red scale, those are the ones that you may want to avoid because of their current situation. If you've got an expired license, they may not have extensions. If you're over the weight limit, they may not have extended their weight limit. So you may want to go around that if you can. So let's take a look at the routing. One of the examples that we used to give a lot is, we've got goods that are coming in into the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and they're sitting on the container waiting to get shipped. And let's just say we're going to take these to Tampa, Florida. So I've entered where I'm at and where I need to be, and you can see the route provided is there's three different options, right? So the quickest or default route is the one that will be selected first, and you can see that the route that is specified in the map correlates to the states that are highlighted on the visualization here. And so I can see here that, okay, maybe I want to avoid Louisiana for this particular situation that I'm in with the data options that I've got selected. So what would happen if I took this sort of central route? Okay, now I can see that instead of going through Louisiana, I'll go through Arkansas. That may be a clear route for me. Or if I want to head north, I can take this path, click on that route, and then I quickly see, okay, I'm seeing more green than yellow or red on this particular route. Given my current situation, that would be the path probably that I would want to take. So we developed this, we call it sort of like a subway chart, if you will, that quickly highlights the states that you're going to be traversing, and then that color code of the different data elements, and then what restrictions or impediments you may or may not get as you go through the different states. So I can see here that the CDL expiration extension may become an issue as I go through Utah. So if that was of concern to me and I want to avoid Utah, I can click on that southern route. I'm no longer worried about that restriction in Utah. So it's a way to quickly visualize what data is important to me, what routes I can take to get from point A to point B, and then sort of that overlay of those data and the states that I may traverse. Let's see here. I need to move
Yeah, Tim, I Tim, I like the ability to click on the map, right? You could actually click on Arkansas.
You
I didn't
can,
know-
absolutely.
I didn't know you guys did that, right?
So if
I-
I wanted to take this route and well, you know, Bing, I think Bing is the API that we're actually using for this
Yeah.
particular route. If I say, well, I'm gonna override their route, I'm gonna take Louisiana out of the equation. I'm gonna head north in Texas and then go through southern Arkansas to get through Mississippi. You can ad hoc create your routes, right? If you're willing to sort of forego the general guidance that's provided. You know, I can take a pit stop in Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, go through Yellowstone, maybe come down through Colorado and see, you know, how does that impact my route? What are the different restrictions that may come into play there? And so, yeah, you're right. You can, this
Yeah.
map is interactive. You can use the default routes, but if you know, had some different waypoints that you wanted to go through, you can actually add those into the mix as well.
Yeah, and Tim, one other comment too, I think the private sector appreciated, the app didn't tell you what road to take. They didn't want that, right?
Right.
They wanted flexibility to make, you know, changes, because they, you know, the supply chain, you know, sometimes trucks just don't go from LA to Florida, right? They'll stop 2 or 3 places around, right? So this gave them the flexibility to select their own, if you will, overall route, but didn't do the routing, right? That was the thing. The routing was the problem, right?
Yeah, this isn't Google Maps or Waze, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
those solutions are already found. It's
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is more of what they needed, Tim, was just tell us what states give us the greatest restriction along the route and which ones give us the least restrictions, right? Hence the color code. The visualization was such a helpful, we got such great feedback on that.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's very easy to use. You know, not only look good, does it look good? I mean, I'll even throw out a term, it's aesthetically pleasing, and a term that I learned back when I was designing and building substations for Pepco. So, you know, that's something that's always been stuck in my head, but this one nailed the head. I nailed it on this one here.
Yeah, and there's other views, right? So we can click on the detailed information if you're you know, in that dispatcher mode and you want to, you know, kick out a spreadsheet of the different states coupled with the different data points that are of interest. You know, you can come to this detailed information view. We're able to kick this out to a spreadsheet. And then another important attribute of this is as you guys were feeding the data, we also had the source that you got that information from, right? And I can click on this and go directly to the source, right? So, you know, this particular, you know, in California, we're looking at the driver's license agency closures. I can go straight to the DMV site, and now I can go and maybe get a contact number or look directly at the source and maybe get a little bit more information, right? So I think having those direct links straight to the source is another added benefit that helped the dispatchers and drivers as they're out there planning their routes.
And that's definitely part of that whole data quality, understanding the data that feeding it to the tool. And it gives you a little bit more of that understanding and confidence when you're, you know, making a recommendation to somebody.
Yeah.
You need to go left versus right, and exactly why. So
This is only as good as the data that's in it. And that's why using Tom's ORL, Tom, I don't know if you want to talk about your operational readiness level, but the ORL is something that came into play here too.
Yeah, very quickly, in the GIS data world, the private sector was trying to figure out a way, what data can I make a decision on right now? Is it operationally ready? Or is it in development? Or is it a one-off, right? When storms happen, there's all kinds of data shows up and then it goes dark. So working with NASA and our partners at the ESIP Federation through one of our work groups, they created basically a data confidence standard based on 10 criteria. 9 states, 11 utilities worked on this for about 18 months. And they came up with an ORL ranking, operational readiness level. 1 is ready to go. You can decide on it's the best data for that application today available because it meets all 10 requirements, right? And then down to a 4, which is sometimes crowdsourced data. It's not bad, it's just swim at your own risk, right? So all the data in here was a 1 or a 2. mostly one, which means no one had to question the data, which gave private sector the ability to make decisions very quickly, because we, the consortium, our SICE working group, we're monitoring that. And one other comment too about this, Greg, this gave the private sector ears to think about, we got 200,000 drivers on the road. We don't use Waze, Maze, we don't use any of that. We use our drivers and their eyeballs to know what the status of the roads are. And they said, maybe we could feed our truck driver real-time eyeball data into this someday, right? So this is a use case always gives birth to another,
Yeah.
another use case, right? And that was just one company, right? Imagine if you had, 5 or 10 of these, because trucks are moving all the time, right? I remember Doug Morris at the OIDA, right? I think it's Owner Operator Independent Driver Association. It's 250,000 members. And Doug and I were talking. He said, Tom, we got our own Sirius XM channel, right? And I thought, okay, so these partnerships I think can leverage not just pushing data out, but maybe someday bringing data in. And that's where we kind of hope down the road. But this got him thinking about it, was my point, right? This opened up a whole new avenue of ways to look at information. And then that always breeds, well, what other information could we do?
Yeah, and that goes back to a lot of our discussions around the sensitive information sharing, SICEnet, and being able to take information and data like this and pulling it into your environment and seeing what other layers are impacted or affected by some of the information that the CRA does provide. So
yeah,
more to come on that down the road, but it just makes you really your brain starts churning different ideas and different use cases and how it can be applied.
Right.
Tim, Tom, Greg, you got a couple good questions in the Q&A chat if you want to look at some of those.
All right. While we review those, I'm gonna quickly throw up the view of what this would look like on a mobile device. So I mentioned before that we architected this knowing that there's multiple different use cases, right? So we've got maybe that dispatcher that has the luxury of having a monitor in front of them, or maybe not. Maybe I'm a truck driver and all I've got is my iPhone. So I flipped my browser. So now we're looking at this like we were on an iPhone 12 or iPhone 13. And you're saying this is the same exact website. I'll use the menu item here. I'll click on state information, and then I'm going to flip my phone. And now we're kind of seeing the same thing. It's just now we're on a mobile device, and I can click in. Let's go from Los Angeles. I think that's auto completing down here to Tampa. And it's going to route for us. And we have the same exact capabilities, right? You don't have to download an app. There's no other requirements for this. You're literally just using your same device. And it's the same exact functionality, whether you're on an iPhone or an iPad or what have you, right? We're looking at the same exact site. So that was.
Tim, you're having some audio problems. I'm not hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I accidentally muted myself.
And Tim, one comment people might think, well, what's the big deal? This is a big deal because with apps, corporate firewalls don't allow them, right? We needed a way to get this information out with no login, no app, no firewall issue, right? And it had to work on any kind of cell phone. So I remember we had this discussion. That was a big requirement, right? I remember specifically 3 companies said, Tom, it's an app, we can't use it. We restrict our drivers for security purposes. And so this was beautiful because it's a website you go to and boom, you're there. And no matter what you're using, iPad, phone, it's mobile friendly, which was a big thing. So again, that just didn't happen. That was a real requirement because of the restrictions for cybersecurity restrictions for mobile devices.
Yeah.
So you want to run through some of these questions here?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to
Yeah,
really
so
digest.
the first one, Tim and Tom, it's from Gina Albanese. Does this work for the continental US, or will it work will it work with Hawaii, Alaska, and other US territories?
That may be an AHA question. I think that was from earlier. I think ours
it?
start with, maybe not.
Yeah, that was from the previous session,
Oh, was it?
Greg.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yours start with the question from Bruce Churchill, are
Okay.
cost to deliver and time to deliver taken into account as routes are analyzed for minimizing state restrictions?
okay, got it.
Those are not. Those are not factored in currently. Right now, we're just primarily focused on, hey, here's some restrictions across different states. We didn't really factor in any cost or time elements.
And the next question is, if I am a utility in California with a mutual aid agreement with a utility in Louisiana or Georgia, can my operations dispatch manager and the drivers in my responding bucket trucks all have access to the app and see the same views for planning, routing, and tracking where our teams are heading simultaneously?
Yes and no. Not interactively in terms of, hey, we're all going to jump on and look at the same view, unless you're sharing a screen or something. But what you can do, and I'll switch back to the main view, for that is you can click over to the detailed information. You can quickly come down and export to CSV, and boom, now you've all got your spreadsheet where you're looking at the same information. So the website, so it's not an app, important to note, as we mentioned before, it's not an app, it's just a website that anyone can go to with any device that can connect to the internet. But there's no mode where multiple people can share the same session, but there are means through which you can quickly share the data that you're looking at.
Okay. The next question is, are there other AHC apps that pull in info like open fueling stations, lodging, et cetera, that we could use in parallel for better situational awareness and moving personnel and equipment?
That's a great segue to the future aspect of AHC and CRA integration, and
Yeah.
I'll touch on this a little bit and then I'll kick it over to you, Tom. So we've talked about sort of allowing for, I guess, elevated privileges, if you will. So, this is all publicly facing, this is all open source information. If there are additional data sets that maybe have access restrictions, whether they be subscription based or what have you, we have thought about means by which you could potentially like log into whatever sources are feeding up those feeds, and we could pull those across through an authenticated mechanism and still render them on the same interface that's open to the public, but those specific data feeds would be limited to just those that have that access. And I'll turn it over to Tom to talk about what some of those feeds may be.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The consortium, through its sensitive information sharing environment, the SISE, has been working on aggregation of data sets for quite a long time, and they have hundreds of data sets that are not public. And we hope to use this app as in a more private version of it, where we can add in not just this data, but we can add the capability of adding the major US highway routes, the hot zones for COVID, the whereabouts of hotels, location of fuel, status of many retail stores and fuel and things like that, weather, traffic, road closures, all kinds of stuff. And they're even developing a capability that when you use the app, you, the user, can turn on if you want to be tracked like any other app. And if you do, it'll pull all the data in there relative to where you are 50 miles in any direction or whatever. And so you don't have to look at the whole country. You can look at just what's coming up ahead of you or ahead of your drivers in the next 50 miles. Amazing. The technology is is not the issue. The data really isn't the issue in the SICE. It's really the individual access and the security around it, right? So if you'd like to stay tuned to that, there's a website you can register with the SICE at siceusa.org, siceusa.org. But our hope is to use that, but leverage this capability, right? This gave us a simple mobile data visualization capability that just didn't exist. Okay, so yeah, we're working towards getting that. What that question addresses is, is exactly what folks are looking. And we had a lot of people using this app for utilities and still use it. And we're working on refreshing some of the data sets that were in there during COVID, but just went away after COVID. The disaster was over, but we're working on restoring that.
Yeah, and Tom, just to kind of, harp on that whole mutual aid part with the electric utilities, that was something that just, was in your strike zone when this first kind of rolled out there, this idea. You guys have been really working that for a long time now. And it's finally nice to see capability being implemented and us building on success that's already been there. So.
Yeah.
Hey, we got one more question in the chat. And if your answer isn't in the affirmative, they may be giving you a requirement. Is there a current or future capability to capture a screenshot to keep my route in case I lose cell connectivity due to bad weather or if infrastructure is down?
So the data feeds are cached, but you still need connection to the internet. I mean, other than we don't have the capability of taking the screenshot of, for instance, the state information. You can, as I mentioned, export to Excel. But I do like the requirement of saying, sort of, hey, take a picture of this, because we've all been in that situation where you're in the hills of Tennessee and all of a sudden, Google Maps goes down on you, and all of a sudden now you're looking for your atlas in the back seat of your car, right? So it's sort of like your atlas mode that you need to have for that. So it's a good requirement.
It's the old sneaker net way, but let's just take a picture of it.
And it's funny. It's funny because we had several utilities, Sherry, test this, right? And that was one of the first things that came back from the drivers. They took a screenshot because the folks that respond to these disasters, they live in areas with no power, no connectivity. This is their world, right? I didn't think of that. So they screenshot everything. I didn't really realize that. And I thought, what a great idea. So no, that whoever asked that question is right on the money, because when you think about it, most of the utilities go into areas, there's no water, there's barely roads, and there's no power, and there's no comms, there's no internet, no Wi-Fi, right? So unless you have a sat phone, you better have things in paper or and stored in your phone. So no, that actually did happen, and it did make an interesting requirement. Boy, that'd be a nice little thing.
Yeah,
have,
and
right?
You could always call back to the dispatcher too. So
no, I tell you what, we just learned. You listen to the users of whatever you're doing, and they'll tell you what they need, right? You just got to listen, right? That's the nice part about it. The people drove the development of this had the drivers and the folks in the field really had their brush on the canvas, and everybody listened to what they needed, and this came out, which was wonderful.
Yeah, great questions. Great questions, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, someone asked for a repeat of that URL you just mentioned a few minutes ago. I think it was for either the use case or. Yes,
if you go to SISE, maybe somebody put in the chat, www.siseusa.org. And what that will do is it'll register you, and it'll give you access for free to the Fleet Movement app, which was the app that captures a lot of information that we hope to pull into the CRA tool. It's public, it's the public version of the app, but it's what we use to synchronize industry and government in response missions across multiple states. So siceusa.org.
Thanks, Tom. Tim, Tom, and Greg, that gives you guys about 3 minutes to close this out. We got a hard stop at 2:10, and Tom is not going to let us run over.
Hey, we know
So,
a guy. Come on.
I'll throw it back to you guys. There's no more questions in the
Well,
chat.
I just want to say, in my 18 years of doing this disaster response business, I've been around a lot of R&D. Never have I seen anything move this quick. And my favorite part about this was it let the people that owned the problem have their brush on the canvas, right? Many times what happens, and I was part of this, I come up with an idea, we go, hey, we bake the cake, we bring it out to the field. Hey, what do you think? Okay, and this was exact reverse. This was, hey, commerce has stopped. Help us. DHS listened, engaged INL, got together. The people that owned the problem came up with the requirements, and then INL came back with the meeting that, and the very people that came up with the requirements then put it to use. We burped the baby, and boom, it went operational. It was
Yeah, and
amazing.
it's a great example of a very positive public-private sector relationship that we've developed, and hope to really just build on it. We are, and it's the future on how we're going. Our leadership is behind that fully. Enhancing those private sector relationships we've got, and really pushing the solutioning of these problems forward. So, hardest thing in government, in my experience, is implementing new capability, and it's a challenge. And Tom, you've seen it, and Sherry, it's just it's hard to do, particularly when it's on the technical side. There's all rules, requirements that go into it. Privacy, IT, IT investments, and it's a process, and we can't do this without you.
Well, thank you all. We are at our time. So this has been a great session. It's really good to hear about this application and share it more broadly. So with that, we will close it out. And John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.